Now, the lengthy countdown to the 2022 polls is now lengthless. In less than 10 hours, the country heads to the ballot in what is Kenya's consequential contest and a transitional election. Tomorrow's democratic exercise will be a culmination of the longest political season in Kenya's recent history. 4 candidates will be aiming to replace President Uhuru Kenyatta, whose 10-year stint at the House on the Hill comes to an end. Azimio la Umoja's Raila Odinga will be making the 5th stab to be the 5th president, having lost in 1997, controversially in 2007, 2013 and 2017. His proverbial last bullet is on. Will the self-declared people's president be the Republic's? Deputy President William Ruto will be seeking the country's top job for the first time. The second in command, who fell out with his boss, President Uhuru Kenyatta, has fashioned his politics around a hustler narrative and a symbolic wheelbarrow. How many wheels will he need to get him to State House? We answer those and many questions tonight. Roots Party's Professor George Wajakoya, whose unconventional agenda to legalize marijuana made him an electorate sensation and darling, wants to weed out bad leadership. How realistic is his white smoke? Agano's David Makali says he is the real deal and comes like the biblical David. Will he withstand the political Goliath of his time? Good evening, and we continue with our special coverage of Kenya Decides here on Kenya's fastest growing television. The first segment was an update from our reporters across the 47 counties of the latest in as far as the monitoring of the election in 9 hours is concerned. Just a reminder that polls will be opening in less than 10 hours time, 6 a.m. as stipulated by IEBC. Let's get to our discussion. As earlier promised, we have a panel of experts who will be making sense of all this that is happening in the country. 9 hours, less than 10 hours to the polls. Professor Peter Kagwanja is here with me. We equally have Professor Macharia Munene. I understand David Makali is also joining us virtually. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. Professor Peter Kagwanja, let me start with you. You have been on this and many other programs here in which we talked of the countdown from 200 to 150 to 100 days. Yes. It's finally 10 hours, Prof.
Yes, it's finally 10 hours. As you rightly put it, this is one of the longest campaign season in the history of the Republic. Of course, this is a very high-stake election. A lot of rhetoric has gone into it, and therefore the stakes are very high. High in the sense that from the time we started talking about dealing with cronyism and state capture and all those things, then it introduced a very special personal security dimension to it, and therefore that raised the stake as it were.
And Prof, perhaps Kenya's longest political season actively campaigning, was it by design or default that it was such?
It was by design, not by law, but by design, because the campaign time was standard. The 1 month active political campaign, obviously we started off with the political parties, quiet politics for party nominations, and then earlier on, there have been a series of activities, voter registration. So it has been a year of active politics and active campaign. But because of the high stakes in this election, you can nominally say it started immediately. The other one ended as early as January 2018. The elections, the campaign started, and you could some of the names that are attached to various contenders in this campaign reflect the different interpretation of whether it is good or bad to start early. The tanga thing, instead of going development, you are just moving around here and there. So these names or these titles.
The proponents of that political side will disagree with you of tangering and not development. Prof, I'll come to you. Let me get to Professor Macharia Munene, who is equally with us. Prof, the countdown is now 10 hours from the opening of polling stations. Clearly it is down to the wire tonight, isn't it, Prof?
Yes, it is. It's a very interesting campaign, election. It can go either way, the way I see it. one of the dangers in this one is that there might be a lot of apathy. And if there is a lot of apathy, then the turnout may not be very high, and that is not very good for the election. But it is an interesting time. It is tense, and we are waiting to see how things go tomorrow.
Prof, tonight...
But people should not expect everything to be ended tomorrow.
All right, Prof, tonight IEBC says it's ready. You analyze Kenyan politics. You are a historian who is very much aware of Kenya's past elections, some troubled, others fair. Is IEBC, in your view, ready?
Well, it has shown indications that it is not as prepared as it should be. Just today, it started telling us that there were some problems with its preparation. So it is not what it was in 2017 or even 2013. There have been quite a number of issues that raise doubt as to its readiness, and that is a problem in itself. The fact that some areas will not have to vote tomorrow is a source of concern, whatever the explanation.
All right, Prof, I'll come back to you. Let me get to David Makali, who is with us equally. David, the countdown, as I noted in the preamble, is now getting to count less than 10 hours. It's finally down to the wire, isn't it, David? We apologize for that. I understand David Makali's sound has an issue. Our technicians are on it and we'll be sorting it. Let me get back to Professor Peter, who is with us here tonight. Prof, IEBC, in a detailed statement earlier on, and we will come to the specifics of what it talked about, created a very good, depending on which side, picture of an institution that is ready to deliver a free election. An institution that we are very much aware has a history of a bungled election in 2017. Prof, perhaps the same question to Professor Macharia. Is IEBC, in your view, ready? Is it satisfying you first as a voter tonight?
Well, I think at this stage it would be too early to call to say whether it perform or not, because we've not seen. What we have had are promises. We've had statements where we are ready. We've had statements that we have put all the papers or the electoral materials in places where they are supposed to be. We've been told that all the officers are in place. I've gone to places like Nyandarua, where I saw its officers coming to meetings to educate people on how to vote. So you are sure that there are officers on the ground. I think the architecture of election is in place. But we expect some hiccups. I mean, the serious hiccups in some places. Already we've started seeing some of them. Obviously, this is a referee, and everybody would want to trip the referee. If you watch American, boxing, American wrestling, things have become increasingly unconventional. So even by saying IEBC cannot perform, in itself is part of that tripping the referee, so that when there is a case, because this ultimately, and this is my guess, this case will be resolved in the Supreme Court, and therefore you want to create evidence early enough. Now, IEBC itself has read...
Prof, are you tonight preempting that there will be a case lodged at the Supreme Court?
Because the lawyers must make money, and if there is no case in the Supreme Court, there is no money made. I think this is some of the things we have to address as a republic. How are you going to preempt every of our election ending up in the Supreme Court? Because that is the trend now. And where it does not end up in the Supreme Court, it ends up in the streets. So 2007 in the streets, 2013 in court, 2017 in court, BBI in court, Supreme Court, and what makes you think that this is not going to be settled by the courts?
And is this the making then of that case, Prof?
That's what I'm saying.
It should get to the Supreme Court if there is a justifiable case, isn't it?
That's why I'm saying in passing judgments, and to answer the question you asked me, I might be the one to contribute to that particular evidence that we will have to end up in court. And I'm saying we need to be cautious. I don't want to look so favorable to IEBC, but let me say the following. Every institution of democracy globally is work in progress. And this is more of a logistical issue. And remember, we are talking about one of the most complex elections in the world today. It is 6 elections in one, all carried out in one day, and not in 6 days. And that is likely to cause a logistical nightmare. And that's why I expect, personally, a number of hiccups here and there. We have started seeing them. I'm sure we're going to discuss the Mombasa issue, the Kakamega issue. And those are not the only issues. There are others that are going to emerge in the process of the election.
All right, let me get to Professor Macharia. Prof, earlier today, IEBC suspended the gubernatorial election in Mombasa County and Kakamega County, 2 counties that are perceived to be an Azimio Raila Odinga stronghold. Azimio, through a statement by a Suna East Member of Parliament, faulted that move, alleging that there is an attempt to meddle with that particular outcome and rigging claims. UDI equally is not satisfied with the suspension of the election in these 2 gubernatorial races. How important, Prof, is it tonight that 2 of the leading political sides are casting aspersions of a decision IEBC made?
Well, it is a serious situation because it indicates some level of incompetence on the part of IEBC, the procurement process, the whole preparation, because Mombasa and Kakamega, yes, are important counties, and both sides have complained. They're saying that IEBC may be up to something, but as politicians, they'll try to shift the blame to the other side, but IEBC is caught in between. I think it was a genuine mistake on the part of the printers and the logistical people, but that's the sort of thing that should not be happening at this time, and it gives credibility to those people who have doubts as to its readiness. I would also say that at the end of this, of course, we are going to have a case in the Supreme Court, as it should be, because we already have indications that some people are going to complain. If they are saying they're accusing the IEBC of chicanery, then their lawyers are very busy right now collecting all sorts of evidence when they lose so that they can go to court, both sides. That is happening, and it is unfortunate that some places elections will have to be postponed, gubernatorial so. It is unfortunate, but it does not augur well for the IEBC as the referee.
All right, Professor Macharia Munene. Let's get to David Makali, who I understand we have him with us now. David, perhaps the opening question I asked both Professor Peter Kagwanja and Professor Macharia Munene tonight. The countdown is now 9 hours. It's down to the wire, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think across the country, the mood is expectant. The country is pregnant for this election. And tomorrow morning, a lot will have to be put behind us as history. All the tension, the anxiety that has driven us up to this point has reached its climax. So I do think that tomorrow, a lot of things will be sorted out. We look forward to a peaceful election, but more importantly, that the systems put in place by IEBC will not fail. If that happens, then I think we should call this one of the most historic elections in terms of the anticipation, the anxiety, and the stakes that are at play in this election.
David, earlier on, IEBC suspended the gubernatorial race election for Mombasa County and Kakamega County. What implications does that have tonight on whichever side of the political matrix one is looking at?
I think, you see, most of the observations that I'm receiving have to do with the political factions or the political parties that are facing off in this election. People are looking at it from a presidential point of view, a presidential election point of view. But I think we need to scale this down to the impact on those people who are in this race, the candidates themselves, who are going to suffer massively because they've spent so much time and resources in the last 4 weeks campaigning, and then you terminate the game in this manner and you postpone the election. The losses to be suffered by the candidates in this election are enormous, and I think we should not forget that particular level of analysis. And everybody's looking at what impact this has on the presidential election. I do think it could have some impact, but not as massive as people are putting it, because after all, this election has been reduced into a presidential contest at the national level, the local seats notwithstanding. So it is disappointing. I mean, if I was one of the candidates, I don't know what I would do. I would probably sue the IEBC. I don't know what they're going to do, because this is obviously an act of negligence on the part of the IEBC.
All right, that is David Makali, who is joining us virtually. Professor Peter, when, for instance, ODM's deputy party leader, the current Kakamega governor, who his county's gubernatorial election has been suspended, says, and I quote, "It is a scheme to rig elections." These are heavy words coming from politicians, isn't it?
Well, I don't know at what, I mean, I wouldn't dispute that. Possibly he has some evidence that can come out if pushed to substantiate. But for me, from where I see it, I think this is a season of conspiracy. And you cannot rule out any event interpreted within the context of that mood, that we have entered the dark area of conspiracy. And every action that IEBC is going to take is going to be received by all the parties involved with a lot of suspicion, because there is tension in the air. Losing this election is going to be extremely expensive for the parties involved. We're trying to see whether the cost on the state can be minimized. That's why you hear the churches, everybody is talking about peace, 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 because the idea here is to minimize the impact of this election, whichever way it goes, affecting the nation, and therefore allowing us to go on with our business as usual without having to go through some of the events we've gone in the past. And therefore understand the context in which this election is taking place. If you just avoid for a moment the presidential candidates and look at the number of people who are going to lose in this election, we're going to have the largest number of losers. Statistics have been put on the table. Yeah, the number of the seats available for the election and the number of candidates that have enrolled. Heads are going to roll and pain is going to be felt, agony.
And actually I have the numbers, Prof.
Yes.
There are 16,105 candidates who are vying for total elective positions of 1,879.
So we're talking about almost 15,000 Kenyans, if that's the math, who are going to be declared losers. And these are people who have sent millions of shillings, who have spent a lot of time campaigning, and who were full of hope that they are going to occupy those seats created by the Constitution. And they are not. And therefore, the day after the election is going to be the most painful day in Kenya for many. There will be less celebrants and more mourners. And that is what raises the stake for this election.
All right, let me get to Professor Macharia Munene, who I understand we have to let go. But Prof, before I do that, let me ask you one final question, perhaps. We are talking of strongholds of candidates, candidates who have campaigned, traversed what they termed and perceived as their stronghold. Just how important will the voter turnout be a determinant to the percentages they will score? And in particular, I ask you this question, Prof, to the presidential contest.
There are two things that are going to determine the outcome of this election. One is the emotional level. The candidate who manages to arouse a lot of emotions such that his supporters, wherever they are, whether in the strongholds or the weak holds, they turn out in big numbers, then that person will have an advantage. The other side is apathy, and there appears to be a lot of apathy around. So if there is apathy in one's stronghold, that's a danger to that candidate, because the voters will not turn out and he will lose to that extent. So both emotional level and apathy will affect the outcome of this election.
All right, thank you, Prof. I understand we need to let you go. Thank you for your thoughts. I'm sure we will be interacting with you in our subsequent shows and bulletins. Professor Peter, earlier on we were talking to our reporters who are across the 47 counties. There is a level of excitement from Kenyans that they need to make a decision. Tonight, for someone who is watching this program, however simplistic this question may sound, why should I vote, Prof?
Well, there are three things that are important in our lives. One is the freedom to move wherever you want. Therefore, the passport becomes important. The other thing is to decide who governs over you, because all things being equal, you should be your own governor. But you can't be, because we have to reduce the space, and therefore somebody has to speak on your behalf. Do you want to decide on who speaks on your behalf, who takes decision on your behalf on critical matters of the state? So the vote becomes critically important. Obviously, the other one is the ID card. It is very important because it gives you the identity that you belong. Now, those three things, there is only one which you can be allowed to have in other countries, which is the ID. You can have the ID in America as well, but you cannot have an elector's card, a voter's card, and most unlikely you cannot have a passport if you are not a citizen of a country. So voting is simply demonstrating and exercising your right as a citizen, a right that is not allowed to anybody else except you who is a citizen. So you must vote that way. I don't believe that there must be some utilitarian reason as to why you should vote. Voting itself is good enough because you have exercised your patriotic duty to keep your country going.
Prof, I ask you that question primarily because of the backdrop of this, and I'm sure you must have heard this argument. In 2017, there were allegations of vifaranga via computer. An election's outcome can be decided without necessarily telling the number of people who have voted.
No, I think, again, as I said, you must always understand the context is as important as the content. The context in which all elections take place is an election of suspicion, is an election of fear, is a context of conspiracy. Whether it's in Africa or in America, look at the way Donald Trump reacted to his losing the election. Look at the way Joe Biden's team was nervous, and look at what happens. All elections are a trying moment for human beings, and therefore it is not different from what we are now, and we've had it in 2017. Remember also, it is important to claim that you have lost as a candidate, because that is the only strategy you have to hold your faithfuls together. You don't have anything else. So conspiracy becomes the most important instrument in election moment. Now, if you accept that you have lost, then you lose all your flock. You have to always keep it you know, it was stolen. It was stolen. It was stolen so that you create a community of grievance. And by creating that community of grievance, you offer yourself as a solution. And that's what our politicians have become adept at doing. Now, rarely will you find somebody coming and saying, we lost. And that's where President Uhuru Kenyatta becomes the exception in 2002. Because he could as well have said he was rigged out by opposition masses. And they could have gone anyway. From that point on, everybody else have said they've not lost, it was stolen. They've not lost, it's stolen.
Fair enough, Prof. Let me get to David Makali. David, earlier on I spoke to our reporters who are in the 47 counties of the country. One feedback that seemingly is becoming a chorus is the concern over the turnout and apathy. For candidates who view Region X and Y as their stronghold, just how important is it that they maximize on the voter turnout to the higher of percentages?
Of course, it's very critical that everybody gets the highest number or the highest turnout in their strongholds, because that ultimately decides the victory or loss by such a candidate. And that's why we have had the lamentations about Mombasa and Kakameg's postponement of the gubernatorial elections, because it's presumed that those are the strongholds of Raila Odinga. However, although there is a lot of pessimism about the turnout in this election, I do think the turnout is not going to be worse than the previous elections. I think we are likely to get between 75 and 85% turnout in this election, because the interest that has been shown by the public generally in this campaign, the all-out campaign strategies that have been employed by both mainly Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, and everybody mobilizing their bases, I do not see the apathy that people are talking about. When you talk about apathy, you talk about below 60% turnout. I don't think we're going to register below 60% turnout in this election. There is no reason to doubt that people are going to turn out. Well, it's been a tough election, you know, in a very bad environment, economic environment. Candidates have slugged out their most, stretched to the limit. And I think the electorate is likely to reward their effort with a turnout, especially at the presidential level election, because of the high stakes in this election between you know, the two camps, main camps. I see that being a motivating factor for the people to turn out and vote.
David, quite a number of arguments that I've read of the apathy question is pointed to central Kenya, which in this election does not have a presidential candidate regarded as a kingpin for that region. That is an area some say might experience an apathy.
Truth is that the turnout may not be as high as was witnessed in the last election when Uhuru Kenyatta was on the ballot. But the stakes in Mount Kenya are so high. Prof Kagwanja probably will have a better take on this, but I do not see the apathy that people are talking about, because the determination by either of the two contending coalitions to get the vote out is so high that there will be little room for below average, I don't think it will also fall below 75 or 80% turnout. So if it's in those regions, so to speak, I do not think that qualifies to be called low turnout or apathy.
Prof, on the question of Central and its numbers.
Well, I think the turnout is going to be high. Obviously, it's not going to be comparable to 2013, when there was ICC hanging over the heads of the region, perceptively, like the proverbial sword of Damocles. So that got people out. Then in 2017, there was a deliberate get out the vote strategy and a lot of funding of it and voluntarism from people. meaning people. I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues from Muranga, who was asking me, Prof, why are you not people doing what we did in 2017, meaning getting people to fuel their cars so they can get people out. So there was a deliberate and elaborate process of getting out the vote so that you get the numbers. Beyond that, I think the stakes are very high in Mount Kenya regions, even now. Remember, the president has been going there. Everybody has been going there. Mother is there, and everybody. If the presidential vote is not going to attract a lot of voting in certain areas, at least local competition, where some seats are attracting as many as 7 candidates, 20 candidates, votes are going to get to get. I agree with David that we may not get the 90s, the high of 90s, which was unusual. Remember, I think we are the holders of the world record in voter turnout in all democracies, where in a number of constituencies in 2013 and 2017, even 2007, you found voter turnout almost approaching the 100 mark, 100% of all the registered voters coming in. I am told in a number of cases they would go and check who has not voted, and they ask where they are. They're told they're in hospital. They rush the hospital, get them, they vote and take them back. That's how serious that vote was. Now, we may not have
Prof,
that.
Was it not that serious primarily because the region had one of its sons competing for the highest office in the country then?
But you also found it in Nyanza, you found it in Western, in a number of ways. You found it in the Rift Valley. And in the Rift Valley, Deputy President William Ruto was just deputy, not a candidate. The only place you found a normal voting was at the coast. And normal voting, even Northeastern, which had no candidates of its own, the voter turnout was extremely high by all standards. Let's say that the fact that we don't have a competitive candidate from Mount Kenya, we have a candidate. Mwaure is from Mount Kenya region. But the fact that we don't have a competitive candidate in the caliber of Kenneth Matiba, Mwai Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta, the fact that we don't have that caliber of competition means that these elections stakes are not as high as those one. Remember also, the stake is about the threat to the community. I don't think whether it's Ruto or Raila, there is a direct threat that is perceived within the community to the point that you'd come out to prevent somebody from coming. I was having a conversation online with one of my nieces, and I posted something about Azimio, and she wrote back to me, it's yellow. So even in families, we are divided, but we are tolerating each other. That's how I'm talking about Mount Kenya region. Whether it's you are blue or you are yellow, we are tolerating each other, meaning that the stakes are low in terms of the threat or perception of threat. Voter turnout is going to be a normal voter turnout, or possibly above normal, but it is not going to be an apathy as people are predicting.
David, whether perceived or a reality, the presidential election and presidential position has attracted 4 candidates. 2, Azimio's Raila Odinga and UDA's Deputy President William Ruto. Again, whether perceived or a reality, are the front runners. I'm sure you must have been looking at the numbers and predictably in your own reading of those numbers. Azimio's candidate says he has climbed the mountain. William Ruto as well has made an impactful inroads into central Kenya. Just how significant will a better portion of that percentage numbers be to either of the candidates?
I think the odds that are still against Raila Odinga in the mountain. They've tried with Martha Karua. She's worked hard. When she came in, there was a bit of excitement, and she made some inroads for Azimio. But that whole enthusiasm, excitement, the novelty of it has sort of waned and flattened the way you would think in COVID terms. The curve of popularity or the advance that they were making has sort of flattened in my view. So I think if I was to hazard a guess, Baba can expect to get up to 30% at the very, very highest point in my analysis, maybe 35%. Now, if you look at that, I don't know where that places him in terms of the national vote that he needs to get the majority, the 50+1, to be able to win that election. The argument has been that every gain by Azimio in Mount Kenya is a loss, and therefore, it reduces the chances of William Ruto therefore winning in the first round of this election, and that his win is determined by the turnout in Mount Kenya. If it's low, then it means the loss that Baba has suffered in other areas, such as Coast and Western, will be neutralized by the low turnout in the mountain. The numbers will come down, therefore, relatively, Baba will have an upper hand in this election. The argument also goes that 30% of Mount Kenya region covers for the 30%, 20%, and maybe 40% losses in places like Coast, Western, and even Eastern, or you could include Northeastern as well. So I think that even though they have made an effort, it's been really a brave effort, I don't think that it has been able to erode in a significant way the toehold that William Ruto and Kenya Kwanza have on the mountain region.
David, Martha is a candidate who was fashioned, at least by her promoters, as the Iron Lady who has the interest of that region in the Azimio faction, positioned as though she will bring the central vote to the basket of Azimio. You're saying the farthest Raila can get is 30 to 35.
Yeah, I think that, you see, the gains that Martha has made or helped to push the Azimio in the mountain region have been reduced because there's been a fight back. And even though people have underrated Rigathi Gachagua, Rigathi has got an army of campaigners with him, including the other politicians from the region, Muturi, Justin Muturi, the Dini Nyoros, the rest of the people who are with him, Kindiki. So they have fought back, in my view, very, very effectively, and reduced the gains that Azimio would have made with just the entry of Martha Karua. But credit must be given to her. She's done her bit, and it's not just within the mountain. Her appeal went beyond the mountain in areas where perhaps Baba would not have accessed, especially the women vote across the country, that she has been able to tilt a little in favor of Azimio. So she has been a vote getter, let it be put that way. How much it will impact on the overall performance of Azimio, in my view, not as great as people are thinking. In fact, ultimately, I think the contest is still, in favor of William Ruto, especially if you consider that he has not lost significantly in the mountain region.
Prof, not as many as people will think, says David Makali, in reference to the numbers Martha is bringing to Azimio.
There is, first and foremost, let's credit William Ruto. He's the first man in the history of elective politics in Kenya to replace a kingpin of another ethnic community when he's actively in politics. It's basically being vanquished in your backyard. And that's what has happened in Mount Kenya. William Ruto's tactic, or if you wish, strategy of shifting the axis of competition from ethnic mobilization to the economy has had the most impactful, result in terms of, shifting the axis of our politics. Never before have we moved away so far from ethnicity as a mobilizing factor as we have today. And that is very well demonstrated in Mount Kenya. Remember, about 10 years, 15 years ago, the region we call it Mount Kenya and William Ruto's native backyard of the upper Rift Valley, the Kalenjin Rift Valley, were at war. And not just war in proverbial terms, but in literal terms. A kind of near civil war in this country. And now for him to have come this far, that there is a generation in Mount Kenya region that is ready to spend a sleepless night waiting for the ballot to come so that they vote yellow. That to me is fascinating. But that said, I think there is an over-exaggeration, and I can hear it from David about his capacity. In the last 2 weeks, I've seen something I've never seen. Voluntarism at its best. I started by seeing Mount Kenya people moving out of their way and organizing a dinner for Raila Odinga and mother. Out of their pocket, and the people who attended, because I was there, were very ordinary business people, not making that huge amount of money, but they were ready to contribute because they knew Raila would need a good finish if he is going to go over what was thought. Normally has been ranging at 25 to 30. That has been the range. But within the last 2 weeks, we've seen individuals volunteering within the counties. Yesterday, I could tell SK Macharia, myself, I could see Mwangi Wairia and others having individual campaign all for Baba, for Azimio. If you look at the current statistics now, it is going at 54%. What can
in
get.
favor of who?
In favor of Azimio or Raila. That's
Central Kenya, Prof?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Heart on hand, Prof. On this program tonight, you can say the numbers are 54% in favor.
That's what is the record now. I personally can vouch. I was there on Thursday, and I have a team. I did an opinion. It came to 45. That's what I got. That's on Tuesday last week. Last week, and what I'm saying is that let people not be shaken or find it difficult that if Raila is able to get 55 from Mount Kenya region. Now,
Prof, I suppose what is not in question is whether Raila Odinga has made inroads into Mount Kenya.
He has,
to be fair, he has frequented the region.
Yes.
His deputy, to be if elected tomorrow, is coming from that region.
Yes.
He says he's climbing the mountain.
Yes.
But how high is he climbing?
That's what I'm saying. He's not climbing the mountain alone. He's not, and in fact, he has not done as much as William has done. William has moved into that region, including very deep villages where I personally had not gone before, where I could hear he was where, and I said, he was there. Because it's a place without roads, without access. But Raila has gotten the embrace of who is who in Mount Kenya, and people have decided to go, even without consulting him. Previously, we used to look to the secretariats to fund our activities. This time, we are going to our accounts and funding campaigns. Why? Because everything is at stake. But let me make the final point that the Mount Kenya region is at war with itself. Because the younger generation is almost overwhelmingly yellow. The older generation, 30 and above, are blue. Now, the battle has been to convince the younger generation without necessarily going overboard in terms of negative politics. That has been the game. Now, how it turns out tomorrow is going to be the game. But I can bet that Raila is going to get something over 50%. I'm talking about Azimio, both Raila and mother, about 50%, given the work that has been done in the last 2 weeks.
Over 50%?
Over 50%.
From Central Kenya.
Yeah.
Fair enough. David, let's move from Central and talk of Coast and Western. These are two regions that in the last election voted in favor of the then NASA, which was led by ODM's Raila Odinga, who is the current Azimio presidential candidate. Will it be fair to assume, perhaps, for this context, that the numbers of NASA as they were in 2017 is what Azimio has as of now? David, if you can unmute your sound kindly.
First, let me, before I can answer your question about Western, I want to go to on his 55% in Obama in what line, I think we have a better there is no prospect that
seem to be having a challenge there as the technical team sorts that out. Prof, will it be fair to assume, from what we have seen, poll after poll indicating a rise in favor of UDA's William Ruto in the coast, Mombasa at 35,
right,
and in Western, will it be fair to say that this will equally put to test the NASA numbers in favor of Raila in 2017?
Well, the point is that when you count the number of campaigners, and by campaigners, you know, in the West, in America, they have what they call the what do you call it, the great vote, the big delegates, you know, the major voters who go to vote as a college. Now, in this particular case, Azimio versus Kenya Kwanza, we almost have a similar thing. When you come to Roa Eastern, for example, you know, Charity Ngilu is a heavyweight. Kalonzo Musyoka is a heavyweight, and they are scoring the goal towards the same direction, backed by Kibuda Kibwana and Karoki and others. So you can see that Roa Eastern is locked for Raila. Not that Ruto will not get the vote. Uhuru Kenyatta got even a seat in 2017, despite that position. So he'll get. But in terms of the real numbers, he locks the numbers. When you come to the coast, has Raila lost the fundamental support he had before? No. It is still intact. Joho is still there. Yes, they were fighting with the Hassan Omar, but Hassan Omar was in Wiper that time. Now he's a candidate in the UDA. But at the same time, there are other people like Nasil's, you know, what do you call it? The first name is
Abdul Samad Nasil.
Nasil. Nasil is a giant now. He's a family name. He's a big name. So in other words, the configuration of the same campaigners is almost intact. When you come to Mount Kenya, you're talking about two giants who have fought for the supremacy of Mount Kenya in different ways. Martha Karua on the one side and Uhuru Kenyatta on the other side. Now they are pushing the ball towards one direction. When you come to Western Kenya, yes, Mudavadi has moved out, you know, Wetangula has moved out, but what have you had in return? We have, you know, Oparanya, you have Eugene Wamarwa, you have Mukhisa Kitui, and you have others now pushing the ball towards that. So I expect that...
But I suppose, Prof, the question is rather on the influence of those who have moved out.
No, that's why we are saying it's limited, because when you look at, for example, the coast, and I made an effort to travel to the coast. I went to Malindi to access. ODM is still a strong party in those parts of the coast. It has also not lost its major campaigners. If I can access any major loss it has made, it's my student Hassan Omar. That's one of the major losses that the party can count. But there are Shabir and there are many others who are still campaigner. You gauge the capacity and power of a campaign by looking at its campaigners. In Western Kenya, the troops are many, from Aturi to Eugene in Bukusuland and so on. So the Raila campaign is intact in that regard. Now, what has happened is that Ruto has made a better, a stronger inroad than Jubilee had done before. But when you come to other parts like Eastland, Gusii Hills, the game is different. The lineup are all for Raila.
And Prof, quite a number of times in your response, you have pointed to the leaders of that region. I asked you the question of influence because there is the narrative that these are leaders aloof of the ground, the proverbial ground politically.
Yeah, that is the narrative that you have had. If you want to make an argument that that is almost uncontestable, you draw a dichotomy between the leader and the led. Yet the leader is a product of the led. You cannot be a leader anywhere and survive and sustain yourself if you don't have the support of the people, particularly at this material time. I think let's give it that most of Raila is going to retain the 44.9% he got outside the Mount Kenya region. So what he is looking for, that has been my argument almost consistently, what he is looking for is actually 15% from Mount Kenya, and he's home and dry. Even if he is going to lose a percentage at the coast and a percentage in elsewhere, he's going to gain it in Mount Kenya, because remember, this is an area that was locked away from him, and it's a huge voting bloc. Currently it's 5.8%, and when you add its diaspora in the Rift Valley, at the coast and elsewhere, then we're really talking about a vote that's almost going to 8 million. So to say.
Let me get to David Makali, who I believe we have now. David, perhaps the question of the 2017 numbers from Coast and Western, which were in favor of NASA. Raila is counting on those numbers. In your view, are those numbers still the same as they were, or have things changed?
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes. Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yeah. There is no doubt at all, and any analyst who tells you that Raila Odinga has the numbers that he had under NASA in Western, in Coast, even Eastern, would be lying. Clearly, in Western, Baba had a lot, over 70% of the last, I think 72% of the vote in the last election. If I'm not wrong, I don't have the figure with me. Clearly, those numbers are not available to him anymore, because William Ruto has made, in Kenya Kwanza, have made serious inroads into one, Kakamega, beyond what Jubilee had in the last election. Two, the loss in Western, specifically in Bungoma, of his numbers that he had under NASA is graphic. Jubilee got like 22% or so in the last election in Bungoma. That number has completely risen, trebled under the current Kenya Kwanza William Ruto alliance. So whereas Baba had over 70% in the last election in Western, this time I'm putting it at between 55 and 60% that he'll get. So he'll have lost quite some significant vote in Western alone. I mean, there is no doubt that Bungoma, Baba is not going to take the vote over William Ruto. Kakamega, Baba will have Kakamega, but again with a smaller margin, unlike in the previous election. Raila will also take Busia by a big margin, but some numbers will still, drop from the last. And obviously, Vihiga, which was his tough, is now sort of a battleground. So if you look at those reduced numbers, I don't know what Kagwanja is talking about the 44% that Baba had around the country in the last election. He has also recognized that in the coast, those numbers have declined, because Kwale, probably has fallen in the hands of Kenya Kwanza. It's a close battle there. Similarly, in Kilifi, Lamu, Baba still controls the coast, Mombasa, so to speak, and maybe Taita Taveta, but the other three counties are now contestable. So those numbers which have reduced in those places, the question is, where is he going to get the top up? And that is why Mount Kenya becomes very crucial. I've had Kagwanja mentioning the principal leaders that worked with Baba in the last election, mainly Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula, who have since moved away. He cannot downplay the significance and the contribution and the vote, the support of the voters that these two gentlemen have. He has substituted them with Mohisa Kitui and Oparanya, with Atwoli in tow. But those three people I've just named cannot hold sway over the kind of support that Madividi and Weta have in Western. However, it must be pointed out that Baba's support in Western, especially in Kakamega, where he still holds sway, is direct to him. It cannot be so much attributable to Oparanya's works or Twoli's spade work. No. In fact, in the recent past, in the last 3 weeks or 2 weeks of this campaign, Oparanya has come under siege in Kakamega because of the governor race, which has pitted him, his candidate Fernandez against Malala and now Cyrus Jirongo. And the onslaught on him has completely reduced his influence in Kakamega, leave alone Western. If you look at Bungoma, the campaign, Baba's campaign in Bungoma was not structured or organized. In fact, I don't think he had a very systematic campaign for the presidential campaign here. The candidates who are running for other seats, the governor and the other MPs on DAP, have been pitching camp a tent for themselves, hardly for Baba. So I expect that Baba will not get the votes that he had in the previous two elections because of those factors. And how does he cover up nationally? That is the big question. And tomorrow we'll be able to tell how this game goes.
And indeed, David Makali, that tomorrow is 28 minutes shy from now. Prof, because of the interest of time, your closing remarks.
I'm saying that from what the opinion polls that are coming through now and done by different people, what we call exit polls, just before the voting, the truth of the matter is that they are taking care of the factors that David is talking about. Nobody is expecting a 70% vote from there. In fact, the figure given for Western Kenya is now 54%. But what the Raila team has done is to maximize on their areas of strength. You're going to get Nyanza's force coming forward very, very strongly, and you're going to get wherever he is strong. Nairobi is going to have a phenomenal turnout. In Mount Kenya region, as we're saying, the people who are campaigning for Baba and Mother are going to work very, very closely. So I estimate that the final tally, when the deal is done, is going to be close to 55%. That I can almost certainly.
In favor of who?
In favor of Azimio. That's what I have. And I'm looking at the entire tally. You see, you are talking about Mount Kenya and all. In Meru, they have made localized competition among the various leaders, but they are all pushing the ball towards one direction. When you go to Western, where he is weak, where is the campaigners are weak, Raila himself is a force. So the 2017 arithmetic has not changed dramatically. From 44, he got 44.9%. That has not changed dramatically. What has changed is the change in heart in Mount Kenya. That Mount Kenya is an open hunting ground for both Ruto and Raila.
Prof, this is contest many say is tight between the two leading presidential candidates.
It is not tight.
You are giving Raila a 55%.
It is not tight. I don't know at what point it become tight, because the strongholds of Ruto is Rift Valley and Mount Kenya, trying to retain the proverbial tyranny of numbers. And that is what is collapsing with the campaign in Mount Kenya region. There's a hyperbolic way of looking at this thing. Look at the pillars. What are the pillars of your architecture? The pillars, Ruto has 2 pillars, Raila has 5. He had Coast, he has Western, he had Nyanza, and now was trying to get to others. He's now gotten to Northeastern. He's gotten to Central, and he has maintained his pillar in the Lower Eastern. Now, so let's be realistic. You can create a storm out of a teacup. In this particular case, remember, Raila is battle-hardened 4 times. This is the 5th. Ruto, the 1st time. There are some teething problems of being a beginner.
All right, Prof, 54, you say?
55.
55.
And above, yes.
The test of time will tell us what the percentage
I'll be here.
David, let me give you the last of words. Your closing
here.
remarks, perhaps.
I'm very excited to hear Kagwanja's prediction.
Yes.
But also, I want to take it with a pinch of salt because of the jacket he's wearing. Now,
Which jacket am I wearing?
Go ahead, David.
And what are you
my own
wearing?
assessment,
David.
I have to take my assessment is that, first of all, I do not believe in the opinion polls which have been published in recent days. I think those polls are exaggerated. I think they are contrived. I think they have been designed to build a particular narrative. My own assessment and all the factors counting, I do not think that the difference between the two leading candidates is as has been projected by the polls and what Kagwanja is talking about, that Raila Odinga has 54 or whatever percentage it is, and Ruto has got 42 or 44% or 45. No. On the contrary, I think these figures need to be flipped. But we wait to see tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow is going to be, the pollsters are going to be on trial. I hope that the figures will hold. I suspect they will not.
All right, David Makali, thank you for your time tonight. Professor Peter Kagwanja, equally thank you for your time. Earlier on, we had Professor Macharia Munene, who was with us. That brings us to the end of this discussion. It's 11:37, 23 minutes from now. It will be clocking the 9th of August. They anticipated purposefully for the elections of East Africa's largest economy, which is in Kenya. Thanks for watching this program. Bye for now. Enjoy the rest of our programs. Remember to exercise your democratic right tomorrow. Vote and vote peacefully. I'm Abu Bakr Abdullahi.